Well, as we said after the game, winning on the road is not easy, and it's something you take a lot of pride in. And I got to give our guys a lot of credit. Things we talked about having to do, especially when you go on the road, about the road focus and your ability to handle the environment. And I'm not saying that like the crowd and things like that. It's just sometimes a new environment, locker rooms, 2-hour delay as you fly out, different things like that. Being able to handle that, have the maturity, still come out, play, start fast, play fast, and do a lot of those things. And as you look back at it, that's what we did. And we're seeing the growth in a lot of areas. I think we're, really starting to envision what this complementary ball looks like that too often you hear about, but it really was. And I thought up front, as you go back and look at it, it was, really where we, kind of, I think, established a lot of things on both sides of the football. And then I gave a lot of credit to the special teams. It was going to be one of those days, not expecting a lot of wind, but wind was going to be a factor in some of the things that you had to do, whether it was kickoffs or even punts. And then our ability to, be dominant in some of those phases is something that they prided themselves in as well. And they blocked 2 kicks the week before against Nebraska, and I thought our guys did a really, really good job and understood what was going to be, what they were going to see, and then have to be able to adapt and adjust. And so as you put all those things together, again, we're playing better football, and that's, to me, what you like to see. We got a long way to go. We know that. We got an incredible mountain to continue to climb week in and week out, day by day. But there are things that that we've kind of pounded and harped upon, whether it's from the winter through the spring, that we're starting to see, and I think those guys are starting to see as well.
Luke, what specific differences or improvements do you think you've seen in the offensive line this season, and how would you assess the job A.J. Blazek has done since he came in?
Well, we don't usually do a whole lot of assessments mid-season about the jobs people are doing, because they're all working. I think they're all doing, getting better. I think initially it's hard to just pinpoint, but I think the guys working together, the guys understanding, even honing in on who's behind you, I think helps too. And you start to figure out what your strengths are once you start to see some of those strengths, and I think you can kind of focus on them and enhance them. I would say as much as anything is just their ability to play together. We've had consistency up front in particular across the board, and I don't just mean that with obviously the same 5 guys starting. We've been relatively free of some injuries, and the other guys have had to play. But I think their ability to figure out what it is that they do well and play together, I think that's where we're doing a really good job up front. We're getting on bodies, we're giving our backs opportunities, and I think that whole thing kind of comes together. It's not just the O-line. There's a connection there with the backfield. There's a real connection with the consistency of what we're doing, and I think that's what's showing. So to say they're doing a great job, it would obviously I wouldn't want to do that, because we know there's a lot more we've got to be able to do and a lot more we've got to grow. But probably first and foremost, I'd say the consistency across the board of how they're playing up front each and every week has been really impressive.
How you doing, Luke? That was a game against like a hard-nosed, run-first team, running down your throat, but you guys did a good job of limiting them. I'm just curious of what you saw out of the defensive line, front seven, how you've seen them progress this year.
Yeah, I thought going into the game, it was about the edges, and that didn't mean that we were neglecting the guys that were inside, but I thought that going into the game, the key for defensively and a lot even offensively was we had to control the edges. We had to win the C gap, and I thought we did a really good job of that, and that's where it started. I think they maybe changed a little bit and didn't challenge some of those things quite as much, and maybe it was because we had done a good job the year before as well. But those guys were able to adjust and adapt a little bit too to some of the things they did a little bit different. But across the board, I think we did a good job at and I don't say dominating. Sometimes you get a different vision of what dominating the line of scrimmage is, but controlling the line of scrimmage, making sure that there's a wall built in a lot of situations was really critical. And I think that put them in a situation where maybe they had to make some adjustments. They tried, maybe some different things, maybe getting the ball on the edge a little bit more early on with a couple things. They run a few gap scheme things, I think, just to try to make us play a little bit more honest and see if they could loosen up our edges. But I thought those guys did a really good job. coaches did a good job of having some mix-ups too, where you didn't just sit yourself in the C gap. You were able to move yourself outside the C gap and then refit the C gap with either a backer or a safety. And I thought those adjustments and changes that our guys were able to handle gave us an opportunity, I think, to first and foremost set edges.
Luke, us from the outside, we can see that Vinny Anthony is fast, but from a coaching perspective, like, what is he doing technique-wise to continue getting himself open and making big
You're
plays?
asking a nose guard what the wide receiver is doing technique-wise to get himself open. Again, it comes back to that similar word of consistency. And I think the one thing since, one of the big things since we've been here in particular, Vinny Anthony, if you asked me, I would say where he was when we walked in the door, just physically, to where he is now, it is a far cry. And that happens because guys mature, guys continue to grow, and he's done that. He's gotten bigger. I think he's gotten stronger. Has he gotten faster? I think he's quicker. I think he's more explosive in some of those situations. And now we're giving him some more opportunities. And you can see guys in particular, just like our team, you can see confidence start to grow. And it's twofold. When he's got confidence in himself, in reverse, the coaches have confidence in him, and the quarterback's got confidence, and we give him some shots and some opportunities. And I think that, as much as anything, that combination of being stronger and faster and more mature, but also gaining a lot of confidence, because in some of those balls, people would say are 50-50, he's made the plays, and I think it'll continue to grow.
Hey Luke, Xavier Lucas played season-high snaps, 38. I think he was targeted like 6 times, just 2 catches for 10 yards. Where have you seen some of the most growth from him, even in season, and how impactful has some of his presence been?
Well, I think impactful, it's hard to tell. I think the great thing, even with him, I think we've had the ability to, as a young guy, to play him situationally. I didn't know he had 38 snaps. I guess I didn't see that was his most he's had this year. He's been a guy that we've been able to roll, and that's something we didn't have last year. I think the depth at the back end made it really difficult to get some of those guys in and get roles for those guys. But as you see, we're playing some different personnels, and he has, maybe not the starting role, but he has a role as soon as we go to dime or as soon as we go into a different package, which I think gives him some confidence as well. He's a guy that we knew walking in the door he was going to have talent. We knew that he was going to, have to be put in there at some point in time, and then how was he going to handle that? How was his maturity going to handle that? Can he, adjust week in and week out? And he's done a really good job. I don't know that he's been targeted. Obviously, you said the targets that he's had, but it's not like somebody's coming in there and saying, hey, there's a true freshman, let's go target him. And that's not because he's a true freshman. It's because he has done a good job when he's been in there being consistent. And I would tell you that that's the way he's been in practice, which is the way he's played. And that's not always what you get from a young guy. Usually there's a bit more of a roller coaster with young guys. They can go in and they can perform well, and they can play well in their 20, 30 snaps sometimes, but even in, throughout the week, coaches-wise, you're still a little bit worried. He's not a guy that I'd say you'd think that about. He's a guy that's a bit more mature beyond his years, and I think it's starting to show, and obviously maybe a little bit more with more numbers and plays and situations like that, but it's because he's earned them.
Up to Mark, back to Zach.
This week, the situation at Northwestern is unique with the stadium they got going on this year as they built their new place. And I guess I'm wondering, when you go to a new place, obviously the field is the same size, but are there any other things that you look at as a head coach that just concern you when you're trying to familiarize yourself and get ready to?
No, we're not going to get into whatever they ask us to play or tell us to play, we'll play. If it's a parking lot, we'll play in the parking lot. I don't think we got a whole lot to say after how we performed and how we played last year. So I could care less where we're playing at and what the situation is. Our guys, anytime you go on the road in the Big Ten, you're going to have to handle some things. Whether it's a new stadium, whether it's the wind, whether it's a locker room, it is what it is. Not going to spend a whole lot of time worried about that. But obviously our guys will be aware that it's not where they've probably played in the past or what they would expect. But again, that can't be any distraction or of any concern this week, because we got a lot of work to do.
Look, I know you were asked about the defensive line, but specifically with Elijah Hills, I know we talked about him earlier in the year. You weren't really sure what to expect, but it feels like every game there's a play or two that he just jumps out. I know you want your guys to create havoc. What is it about him mentally and physically that allows him to do it?
I'd love to tell you, I could tell you mentally and physically mentally I'd like to tell you that's not the case. I've known the guy for 6 months, but I can tell you this, that he's a competitor. And I'm not saying I knew that watching film in the short amount of time which we had to get him here. As we got him here, you know, you saw that he had a competitive spirit to him. Did you know how much, you know, kind of explosion he had and things like that? No, I initially thought he was a smaller guy, but as he got here and, you know, got into the program and things like that, he's bigger than maybe he appears, and he has a little bit more pop than maybe I even thought and knew it initially. But I do think there's a confidence level there that he continues to show week in and week out. And I think that's something that you didn't know from spring. That's something you didn't know even from fall camp. Just because it's kind of a monotonous, repetitive thing, and then, you know, how guys kind of handle Saturdays is always a little bit different. And so you know, when you got new guys like that, you kind of are curious how that's going to happen. And I can tell you, he's continued to grow. He must have been he had confidence, but you can see that confidence is continuing to grow. And we try to do a good job of putting him in some positions where he can play a little bit freer, because, you know, where you'd love to have some guys that are different across the board. You know, we've talked about this, whether it's backfield, right? You know, whether it's even up front, the ability for us to play 6 guys or 5 guys, and they're all a little bit different, I think bodes well for some of the things that we want to be able to do, and it gives him an opportunity probably to make some more of those havoc plays, because he is a little bit different maybe than the other guys that are playing up front.
Jesse?
Luke, you've said a few different times this season that you wanted to put more on the offensive line and that they could handle it. Obviously, I know this group offensively has room to grow, but is what they did on Saturday sort of everything you hoped this offense could be in terms of blending some of those big pass plays with being physical in the run game?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, the ability to make some plays down the field, you know, we showed that play, I think it was the first one. No, actually, the first 2 plays was the second play of the game, and the third play of the game. That was the first 2 plays I showed Sunday, and then the third play was the big shot. And everybody just sees the shot that Vinny Anthony caught, and then you start to go back at it, and you look at the pocket, and you look at the ability for Braden to kind of have some patience with it, to be able to move himself a little bit, step up, and have a free lane. Like, those are the things that sometimes people don't talk about. You know, they just look at the shots down the field, and I think that's where, you know, putting some pressure on the guys up front, saying, okay, it's not just pound the football, it's not just the run game, it's how clean can we keep it. You know, I think he was sacked 1 time. He probably was only hit a couple times. I know one on a 3rd down play that we didn't, I don't think we blocked the edge. I think they slid a guy off the field side edge, and he obviously completed it on 3rd down. Braden took a shot, but other than that, he's pretty clean. And I think that balance is what we would vision, but it doesn't happen unless you can, you know, not just control and run the football, but that you can protect as well and give him the pockets that we need to give him. So, yes, there's a lot of positives from the guys up front, that they're doing a good job, but it's going to continue to grow. And there's going to be continued to, as people see that, they're going to challenge them more in different ways, and they got to be able to handle it. And, you know, their ability to adjust and adapt, I think, is where, you know, some of the things that maybe we didn't do as good a job of last year, I mean that within a game, I think we're seeing from the maturity of those guys and that connection with just them, you know, obviously their coach and obviously the backs as well, because the backs are a big part of some of that protection.
Luke, with some of that new technology with the iPads, just how have you had to adjust, you and the assistants have had to adjust, you know, throughout this season, but also just where have you maybe even seen that new technology help the most within this team or position group?
I do think it's up front. I do think, because each and every week, you try to simulate what guys are going to do. And it's always a little bit different. I tell the defensive line guys every week, like, we're going to try to block it the way we expect them to block it, but it's going to be different, right? They're going to come off the ball a little fast. They're going to be a little strong. And you've got to be able to adapt and adjust, and, you know, just what your techniques are. And so I think those guys in game, to be able to see what's happening, I think it's helped those guys. I think the same thing on the offensive line. The thing about it is, as you become, you know, a little bit more in tune with what it is that you do, right? The what's and the whys. That's where the game time, you know, adjustments happen. And when you can have the maturity to understand the what's and the whys of what you're doing, when you see things, you know, in real time, because you can use the iPad, it does give you an opportunity to make those adjustments. And sometimes the coach, that's simple because you spend all this time studying it and doing it. But for those guys to understand that, to be able to see something and then be able to, you know, adjust, like I just talked about the D-line, to be able to adjust how they're playing something, based on the way that which they're blocked. It's still a zone block, but they are playing it a little bit different than what you've seen all week. And I just think that that has given those guys an opportunity, the mature ones, the ones that have played that ball, to understand that there's, you know, little adjustments. It's not a wholesale change within a game, but there's definitely different ways that which you have to play on both sides of the front.
Look, I know it's early in the week, but do you have any sense of where Will Pauling is at in terms of his health and availability for Saturday?
No, we won't. I mean, he'll you know, obviously he'll be a little bit questionable from the start of the week, but I think that there was some good news in that there wasn't a concussion. It wasn't anything that maybe is major of some sorts. So we just got to see where he is and how he feels. And like I said, it's early on right now, but with a lot of guys like Will, we do need to continue to be smart during the week. There's a balance to what you're doing, but you are starting to get to that middle of the second half of the season. And we kind of talked about this as we move forward. This is a different league now, and you do have to be able to handle things a little bit different as you get to that mid-second half of the season.
To market.
Atticus, you can't talk about the win. It seems like Atticus is, you know, he kicks I don't know if it's a tough ball to catch, but it just seems like, you know, he's made it an adventure for the opposing team there. And I guess I'm wondering what have you seen from him in terms of him being able to, I don't know, put more, you know, some spin or
I
something.
don't know that he's. Last week was a tough one to think you're gonna put a whole lot on the ball, right? I mean, they were gonna bring 7, 8, sometimes 9 guys, and the idea wasn't as much of, hey, how can we place the ball, as it was to let's make sure we are in a rhythm to get this ball off. And I mean that because a lot of times they wouldn't even cover the gunners. They didn't cover Will Pauling or Vinny Anthony. They just let them run free. They weren't trying to return. They're trying to, you know, obviously get a hand on it and block it. So that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult in some things, but that's where you're seeing even the growth of Addy. He understood what the game plan was. He understood how he had to, you know, execute the rhythm in which he had to punt the ball with. And but I would say sometimes, you know, a left-footed punter, that, you know, even though it's not always a spiral punt, it's a lot of end over ends the way we kick it. It is different, and it's not something that guys can replicate every week if you don't have a left-footed kicker. And so I think the combination of those things, along with the pressure that, you know, those guys have been able to apply, has given us an opportunity to, you know, take advantage of that. You know, we punted 2 into the end zone this past week, which is a far cry from what we want, but there was unique conditions with how the wind was and the pressure. So you know, we can do a lot more with where Atticus is, not just with his ability to kick the ball, but with his ability to understand, you know, game plans and what people are trying to do to attack us.
Time for a couple more here, Jesse.
Look, you've been able to have a lot of success running the ball, especially these last couple of weeks when you've pared down the rotation. How do you decide when and how to use Cade, given his production, especially knowing you're trying to get Darian going?
Yeah, there's not an exact science. And I know it can be frustrating for some, and Cade in particular. Like, there's nobody that's got a higher, you know, per carry average than Cade does. But I think that's a product of a little bit of the system. And we try to refer to it every week and remind guys that if you do what's best for the team in the long run, it'll be what's best for you. Cade is a prime example of that. And when he gets his opportunities, he's taking incredible advantage of those opportunities. And the way the game goes, the way the season goes, the way that position is, we're going to need at least 3 and possibly 4. You just don't know when and you don't know how. And it takes a lot of maturity. That's another word you keep hearing over and over again, but it takes a lot of maturity to be able to be in that position that not everybody can do. It couldn't be the second, third, or that third/first in some of the things that I talked to him about. That's a difficult position to do, and he's done a great job of it, and who knows how it's going to continue to roll, but it's a little bit of a, you know, not a crapshoot. We have an idea, but it's a little bit more of, hey, what can we handle, what can they handle, and how can it be successful to us? Because if a guy like Cade couldn't handle that, when he did go in there, it wouldn't probably be nearly as good as what it has been, and you wouldn't feel as good if something else happened and him walking in there and being the number 1 guy as well. So, like I said, it's a process, but his ability and his maturity give us a chance to use it the best way possible for the team.
Luke, last week the NCAA put out a study about the online abuse that athletes have gotten and how much it's increased in the last few years. I know you keep your head under a rock and something you like to say. Like, is that something you ever talk to your players about? Just how do you handle that type of stuff? Like, I know it's easy to say just ignore it, but it's hard, I imagine, for people this age to ignore their phones.
Yeah, I don't know that it's something we talk about as a team. We, leadership group wise, we had mentioned things and always reminded our coaches the relationship they have with those guys to be on them, to see, but again, I'm one of those guys, like, guys, you gotta be able to handle, you're being treated a little bit differently now as close as you are to pro athletes, and there are some things out there that it's gonna take maturity to handle. And, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's good, but I don't think there's any of them that could just delete it completely and not look at it. But I think it's something we're gonna have to continue to address with college students, right? I mean, it's not going away, and the more they're seen in the light of a pro athlete, the more that I think that they're gonna have to expect to be able to handle. And, so it's something I think more so the coaches dive into. We do worry when guys, hit a wall, or you can start to see some things that bother them, and we'll take them individually. But as a whole and as a team, no. I mean, we talk about the big picture things that, not as much people talking about individuals, but us as a whole when they get on us, and try to make sure that we use that as a motivational type of thing. But it's something that, it's not going away, and it's something that from within your own program, if you don't have a great culture and you don't have a great relationship between the coaches and the kids, I think it could be something that could linger and cause some, damaging effects.
Anything else here? Jake? One more?
So just about the game coming up on Saturday for Northwestern, with the early film that you've done, you looked at, just what stands out on both sides of the ball with Northwestern?
I mean, it's a really solid football team. I think they do the things they do really well. They're physical. They play well up front. I thought last year they controlled the line of scrimmage, and particularly better than any other game that we played last year. And when I say they controlled the line of scrimmage, that's probably me not wanting to say that they dominated us up front on both sides of the ball, but in a lot of ways they dominated us up front on both sides of the ball in a lot of other areas. So I don't know that it's a completely different team. Obviously the quarterback is different, and obviously there's some personnel things that are different, but it's a very sound football team that doesn't beat themselves. They're going to put the ball in obviously the quarterback's hands and make plays, both running and throwing, and they're going to be physical and square and sound up front defensively. And it's going to be a challenge. And anytime you go on the road, like I said, it takes an incredible amount of focus and discipline to, wherever the situation, wherever we're playing at, to go in there and beat somebody on their own